Surprise! 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 We have a brand new Micro Four Thirds camera. This is the brand new Lumix GH7. I've only had this for a couple of days. Lumix have sent it to me to do a quick first impressions video, so it won't be as in-depth as I would like, so I'm going to do a follow-up video at a later date. But for now, I can tell you exactly what's new and why we should all be very excited about this new update. First of all, let's start with the design. I'm very happy to say that the body is exactly the same as the GH6, which is a very good thing. We have a very premium feel to this, and if you're coming from an S5 II or a G9 II, they have the same body, you'll immediately feel some premium differences with this style. The front dial, for one thing, is very, very nice. I much prefer this sort of design. And we have a much deeper grip as well. And that's because inside the grip, we have our dual card slots, which is a CF Express card and an SD card. So we don't have dual SDs, we have one of each. And I'll explain why shortly. Another thing that this camera has design-wise is a very nice articulating screen. It flips out and around, so that's very nice. And we have the heckin' chunkiest thermal management on here. And that's because, drum roll, the GH7 can now record Apple ProRes RAW internally. Yeah. So let's jump into the first major update then. Apple ProRes RAW, 5.7K at that. If you are a pro video sort of person, you probably know all about it. It's pretty much industry standard for a lot of bigger productions, but I've never got to grips with it personally, simply because I've never been able to record it internally before. The first thing that you'll notice with these clips is there's a heck of a lot more dynamic range versus standard MOV file formats. This is because the camera's recording as much information as possible. You can even change the white balance. You can even dial it down if you overexpose dramatically as well. There's so many benefits to ProRes RAW, but the payoff is it is a very big file size, so it's definitely something that I would use in the right scenario, the right tool for the right job. So you can record the Apple ProRes RAW straight to the CF Express card internally, but you do also have access to SSD recording, which I think is just brilliant for this, because around 1 terabyte of storage will give you about 30 minutes of recording, so sometimes it's just more feasible to use an SSD on top of the camera. It's still a heck of a lot more minimal than getting a big rig and having an external monitor to do all your recording. And just like with the recent updates to the S5 II range, we can use proxy recordings alongside our main recordings up to Cinema 4K. It still doesn't include the open gate settings, unfortunately, which is a shame for me because those are the only files that my laptop struggles with personally. But for more professional shoots and bigger productions, proxy media is worth its weight in gold. So let's talk about price, because I think, you know, when I was hearing the spec of this camera, I was sort of looking between my fingers and expecting the worst, but actually it's available at the end of July and it's going to be £1,999 body only. Under 2,000 beans and you get all of these features. I think that's such a competitive price. I'm really happy with that. I'm cradling it like a child. So what else is new? It's like Lumix have poured the G9 Mark II straight into the GH7. We have the same sensor, so it's the new 25 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor. We also have the best phase detect, autofocus and subject recognition in the Lumix line as well. There's even been a few bumps in that area with the subject detection. In the menus now, the GH7 has trains, for example, and we have the best IBIS in the business as far as I'm concerned. It's absolutely rock solid, exactly the same as the G9 II. You have much more solid E-stabilization and it will automatically correct barrel distortion if you're using a wide angle lens as well. Also, we've been very video centric at the moment, which makes sense. It is a video-centric camera, but there's a ton of just photo-centric stuff as well. It's showing off. You've got handheld high-res mode, as you would expect. You have live composite mode and your usual time-lapse features. It's also inherited all of the burst modes from the G9 II, which is crazy. So with your electronic shutter and manual focus, that's 75 frames per second in full RAW. With continuous autofocus, you have 60 frames a second or 20 frames a second. And then you also have the pre-burst modes, which is in 60 frames a second and 20 frames a second. I'll show you some clips that I've got from the G9 II recently with these modes. It's absolutely astounding. It basically means that you can record up to 1.5 seconds before you press the shutter. So if you're waiting for action to happen, like these kingfishers diving, for example, it makes your keeper shot percentage just so much higher because you don't have to rely on your own reaction skills. Wait till the action's done, press done, and it saves the images. And in terms of the buffer, it's 200 raw images in one go, so very similar to the G9 II. Then for the mechanical mode, it's exactly the same as the G9 II. You have 10 frames a second in the mechanical mode, and that works like a charm for fast moving things. The AF always locks on, and it's really rock solid. Don't they know we're trying to work? Jumping back to video specs for the moment, you've still got your open gate settings, which is so handy. What is missing, which I was hoping may be included, is the new MP4 Lite format that's in the Lumix S9. That's the format that you can copy onto your phone and share to socials very easily. But I do suppose the GH7 is a little bit overkill for that. So I do understand why it's not here. In terms of slow motion features, it's basically the same as the GH6. I was hoping for a couple of updates in this area, but do you know what? It's already quite excessive. It's 120 frames per second in 4K with continuous autofocus and audio. In HD, we have 240 frames a second, and that's still with audio as well. And then using the variable frame rate, which doesn't record audio, it can go up to 300 frames a second, which is absolutely crazy. Another innovation is the new audio accessory that you can buy. If you use this accessory with the GH7, you'll be able to get 32-bit flow audio, which means it's basically impossible to have it peak. And as someone who has had peaking audio plague them from time to time, I can really see the benefit of this. That accessory will also be available alongside the GH7 at the end of July, and it'll be, I think, £500. And I'm also really happy to see that all the new innovations with the real-time LUT features are also in the GH7. So we can bake in LUT to the video, and also you can access Lumix Lab, bring in your own LUTs, use them for photography. It works in exactly the same way as the S9 in that respect. As I mentioned, the only thing that isn't the same is there is no MP4 Lite inside the GH7. But I'm really happy to see that Lumix are unifying all these cool features basically across the range. It's Emily from the near future here. I've had a little bit longer with the GH7 now, and it's a little bit more of an overcast day today, so I'm not holding out hopes for great test footage. I apologise for that. As a GH line fanatic, with the GH5 being my all-time favourite camera, I'm overjoyed that we have a number of firsts in the GH7. It's the first GH camera with PDAF, of course, and for those keeping count, here are another number of firsts. The GH7 is the first Micro Four Thirds camera to offer the new real-time LUT and Lumix Lab features. I have a dedicated video all about that if you want to learn more. And it's the first Micro Four Thirds camera to offer proxy media recording and frame I/O integration. So with the Micro Four Thirds system, I often find myself talking about the size of any given camera, and there's no getting around that the GH7 is blooming huge. But I know that'll disappoint a lot of regular Micro Four Thirds users, but for the audience that this is targeted at, I don't think they care. I think having the thermal management and the truly unlimited recording is a much better benefit than having a smaller package. That being said, I'm still holding out for a smaller G9 II, whatever you want to call it. But someday soon, Lumix, please. One of my favourite things about the Lumix line in general, and it's no different in the GH7, is the way that you can navigate all of the complex video formats. There is a brilliant filtering system, so if you need to quickly find 120p, for example, you can just filter by that and find things very quickly and easily. You can then also bounce it down into a favorites menu, and I keep that in my quick menu setting like this. What I do on all of my Lumix cameras is just keep a bank of maybe 8 of my favorite settings, and then I can quickly and easily change between all of them as I'm working. This even works if you're swapping from Apple ProRes to MOV, for example, as well, so you don't have to go into the menus and change that. If you use it in the quick menu, it does it all automatically. One thing I have noticed with the GH7 in the couple of days since I've been using it is while the SSD recording is super handy, it doesn't add too much to the bulk. There are certain modes with the SSD recording that you can't actually use. Anything 120p, for example, I get a pop-up that says I need to connect a different power source. So while it's great to have the SSD recording to take the bulk of the Apple ProRes because the file sizes are massive, it does add that extra layer of friction because I have to go into the menus, turn off SSD recording, there's a second or two while it goes back to the SD cards and the CF Express cards, and then I can access my 120p. I so wish that everything could be recorded onto the SSD so there wasn't that friction. It's a small thing, but sometimes it does slow you down when you need it. And just for clarity's sake, you can record the Apple ProRes RAW internally into the camera with no SSD required. The caveat being, my 128 CF Express card allows me about 9 minutes of footage. So my puny cards don't cut it, which is why I'm personally relying on the SSD recording. If you get larger CF Express cards, there's no reason why you can't cut out the SSD entirely and have a much more minimal setup. One benefit of using Micro Four Thirds versus a full frame setup like the S5 II, for example, is the S5 II has a crop when you change to 60p, so it effectively changes your focal length by 1.7 times, I think. Whereas in the Micro Four Thirds system, your 60p and your 120p and everything else for that matter, there is no crop to factor in. So whatever you're using as your focal length, it's absolutely fine and it won't change your field of view. The only place that there is a crop is in Cinema 4K using Apple ProRes RAW. That's the only thing that has a little punch in, everything else is crop free. So my first impressions of the GH7 so far is it's given a lot of what people have been asking for, and I hope it's going to be really positively received. I think you couldn't ask for much more for the spec and the price, and it's a brilliant flagship Micro Four Thirds camera if you're into a video-centric sort of style. For me personally, I think if I didn't own the G9 II, I would be jumping all over the GH7. But for my needs, the G9 II probably sorts everything absolutely fine. For the right person, I'm sure the GH7 will be an absolute godsend. If you have any questions about the GH7, I do have it for a couple more days, so I'll do my best to answer them in the comments. And watch some of these videos next. They're good, I promise.